First tonight on Our News Weekend, an inmate serving 3 years at the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services is dead, and 2 others are nursing stab wounds. Our News was on the scene and we have the details. Plus, a multi-million-dollar development in the Exumas could come to a screeching halt. That's if a resolution to a frustrating situation with a neighboring developer can't be reached. And then, could we see changes coming to the way we judge Junkanoo? The culture minister responding to concerns raised by several Junkanoo groups in the capital. He says it's time to tighten up. The details on these stories and so much more as Our News Weekend starts now. This is Our News Weekend. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Megan Shepard. An inmate at the Department of Correctional Services is dead tonight after being stabbed to death shortly after 8:30 this morning. Our News was on that scene earlier this morning as initial investigations began. Inmate 60-year-old Brody Fritz is dead after being stabbed during a prison altercation early Saturday morning. Officials from the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services tell us the incident occurred in the eastern group of the maximum security facility while residents were carrying out their normal routine of disposing their overnight waste under the supervision of staff members. 3 inmates were stabbed during the fight. They were all examined by the medical doctor, and Fritz was pronounced dead at the scene. The second victim was taken to hospital for further care, while the third victim did not sustain life-threatening issues. According to officials, Fritz has been in the prison since July 29, 2024 for various offenses, including 7 counts of housebreaking, 3 counts of stealing, 2 counts of damage, deceit of a public officer, unlawful possession, and vagrancy. He was serving a 3 years imprisonment. The accused perpetrator is currently awaiting trial for murder and has since been placed in isolation. Her Majesty's coroner, along with the police force, will continue to investigate and determine necessary action. Meantime, months after it was passed, National Security Minister Wayne Munro is suggesting people have yet to be charged under the new anti-gang legislation introduced by the Davis administration. Munro said the goal is to ensure cases under this law have a high likelihood of success before taking action. Munro, who is also a criminal defense attorney, said officials are taking a cautious approach to enforcing the law, having learned from previous legislation that securing convictions requires careful preparation and substantial evidence.
What we've learned from the last iteration of anti-gang legislation is that it's important to get it right. And so to prove that somebody is not only involved in a gang in terms of being a collaboration of persons, you have to prove that they're involved for a particular purpose. Without disclosing much, I can say that the police have been taking steps to gather intelligence to move under the Act once they are satisfied that they have that material.
The anti-gang bill was introduced by the Davis administration in response to a spike in murders, many of them linked to gang retaliation. Under the law, gang leaders and members can face up to 25 years in prison, while anyone who commits an offense as a gang leader or member or intimidates someone into joining a gang could be jailed for up to 7 years.
I know sufficient from three and a half decades of practice that it's very easy to rush out and start a case. It's much more difficult to close it. And once you don't close it, you actually empower people because they will get the impression that this legislation has no teeth because you tried and you failed. That's what happened with the last piece of legislation. And so we're very careful that when we do move under the legislation, that the probability of success will be very high.
Prime Minister and Minister of Tourism, Investments and Aviation Chester Cooper says the government is heartbroken over that tragic incident that has perhaps left 67 people dead. It was a midair collision involving an American Airlines passenger plane and a U.S. military Black Hawk helicopter over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. Wednesday night. Cooper says it's a sobering moment with lessons that can be learned all around.
So our thoughts and prayers go out firstly to the families. Of course, American Airlines is one of our greatest partners, bringing 30% of all of our traffic to the Bahamas. We reached out today to the senior management expressing our thoughts, our prayers, and our sympathies. No doubt there will be learning moments, and it will make aviation industry stronger still.
The crash forcing a temporary shutdown of Ronald Reagan International Airport, causing at least one flight delay Thursday morning. The incident raising questions on whether or not the destination is a safe one to travel to. Cooper had this to say.
I think you'll see more car accidents than plane accidents, and it is quite normal to have some anxiety and some fear after an incident like this. But the reality is that people will still fly, people will still come to the Bahamas, especially from that northeastern territory. So we're looking forward to receiving more and more.
All right, well, Porter's Key Dock will soon be electrified. The hope is that before the year is out, business owners, for the first time in history, will be able to switch their power sources from generators to the grid. Authorities touring the area and speaking to vendors earlier this week about the historic move. Our Joshua Williams was there for that tour with officials earlier this week.
Government earlier this week taking a walkabout under the bridge where stalls are expected to be fully electrified, easing the cost of operations to vendors at that location. One of them telling Our News he will save $60 every day on fuel. A number of parliamentarians touring the dock area on Thursday. Generators have already been installed by Bahamas Power and Light, with some work left to be done before they're fully operational. And for president of the Porter's Key Dock Food and Vegetable Vendors Association, Armenic Bow, she says the modernization of the facility has been long awaited.
Now it's here, and I'm sure that my vendors will embrace the opportunity. Most of them has already put the mechanism in for electricity, so most of us have electrical supplies in place, meter boxes in place, just ready for them to come and run the spiders. You know, we had a transformer here for quite some time. It's been 8 years, it's been locked up in there. I'm surprised it still look brand new, so we're ready to go.
Fires in the area have caused damage to a number of stalls over the years, the most recent one last year destroying 3 stalls. Agriculture and Marine Resources Minister Jomo Campbell says they haven't forgotten it.
We got word this week that the permit numbers and the permits will be available, if not tomorrow, as of Monday. And so this is, again, just another example of collaboration between ministries, because it's going to be ongoing dialogue between the Ministry of Education, Energy and the Ministry of Works, because as was said by Mr. Bastian, there's still a lot to do. There are always going to be issues that we have to address, but the main thing is that we're going to address them together.
Energy and Transport Minister Joette Colby Davis was also there to explain the scope of works.
We had our team from BPL come out and confirm the infrastructure that is already in place, and that is what we were touring earlier, so that we can confirm that BPL has done most of the heavy lifting in terms of the infrastructural upgrades needed to be able to bring electricity to Porter's Key. And then we were looking at where we would put the meter boxes, and I am told that this is the area that has originally been designated for the meter boxes, and then you'll have the connectors, the spiders connected to each of the vendors to go out and power up their individual sites.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Joshua Williams.
Great news. Thanks so much for that, Joshua. Well, the developers of a multi-million-dollar ecotourism development on Big Samson Key in the Exumas is calling the situation with a neighboring developer discouraging and frustrating. Our Marlena Leonard has more on why he says if that matter isn't resolved, it's game over for the future of his development.
I think what's going to happen, potentially, I think ahead of here a little bit, DEP's going to go, oh, you can't dredge the bay, but you can put an employee dock there. And I just have to say publicly, if that's the outcome, what you've seen is what we're going to do, and we're packing up and leaving. I mean, and the 50 jobs that should be here a year from now won't be here anymore, because it's not fair.
Bob Coughlin initially signed a heads of agreement with government for the Turtlegrass Resort and Island Club in March of 2023 with a vision for a $50 million ecotourism development. Since then, that vision has expanded to potentially a $75 million project. With an all-Bahamian construction crew, the project is the second largest employer in central Exuma, spending nearly $1 million a month, with 80% of that staying in the Bahamian economy. While touring the development on Big Samson Key, we saw the progress underway for Phase 1, called Crocs Cove. But Coughlin says without resolution of the concerns with the neighboring Integra Rosewood development, their plans beyond that phase have been put on indefinite hold. Former executive director of the Bahamas National Trust, Eric Carey, is now president of One Consultants. Serving as an environmental consultant for the resort, he says the potential of dredging in the Northern Bay would be hugely detrimental.
Behind me is this very sensitive North Bay. It has one of the most amazing conch nurseries you will find anywhere in the Exumas. It's got wonderful seagrass beds, so it's important for carbon sequestration and the whole carbon credits talk. It's got coral reefs. It's got sea turtles swimming through here very regularly. It is one of the most sensitive and most intact ecosystems that I've seen in this part of the Exumas.
We reached out to the Integra Group asking if there were any alternative locations or potential for a roll-on, roll-off dock being explored and what communication had been like with Coughlin. While they didn't address those questions, they released a statement saying in part that their project is fully aligned with the government's established guidelines and procedures and that they trust the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection and the relevant government agencies to carry out their work diligently and objectively. Reporting for Our News, I'm Marlena Leonard.
Thanks so much, Marlena. Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, Mario Boleg, responding to recent concerns raised by several Junkanoo groups about what they describe as a deeply broken judging system following a meeting held earlier this month. Leaders from Genesis, Roots, music makers, and Junkanoo commandos voiced their frustration over the perceived bias and lack of transparency in the judging process. This week, as he entered the House of Assembly, Boleg was questioned by reporters about whether or not he had any dialogue with the groups. The minister says he hasn't had a chance to meet with them yet, but he is fully aware of their concerns.
There's some things that we, myself, along with the National Junkanoo Committee and the JCNP, that we will do. We have not met yet with the post-mortem of Junkanoo, and we will be doing that again because there's some things we need to change and tighten up before the next Junkanoo parade. So all that would happen in due time.
While the minister reassured the public that changes would be forthcoming, he stopped short of announcing any immediate alterations to the judging system, stating that more discussion and evaluation were needed to ensure a balanced approach to reform.
We have to look at the entire system of Junkanoo, everything. And that's what the post-mortem is all about. And wherever there is improvements, we always need improvements. Improvement is always necessary. So wherever there's need, we will surely look at that and make the necessary steps to correct it.
Well, when Our News Weekend comes back from the break, a moment of reflection and unity as the Bahamas Customs Department recognizes International Customs Day with a prayer breakfast. And later, a smooth blend of good fun and good drinks. Our Danielle Miller has a recap of how one local business celebrated Sangria Week. Those details still to come when Our News Weekend returns.
Diet-friendly special.
The Bahamas Customs Department observing International Customs Day recently with a prayer breakfast at the C.A. Smith Government Complex in Freeport. The theme, Customs, engaging traditional and new partners with purpose. Customs organizations worldwide celebrated the day with various activities. And over in Grand Bahama, the prayer breakfast served as a moment of reflection and unity with prayers lifted for families, government leaders, and customs officials. Acting Deputy Comptroller of Customs, Whitney Kenny, telling us that the Customs Department in Grand Bahama remains committed to operating with efficiency, professionalism, and excellence.
We continue to, like the theme says, working with our partners. We want to keep them in the forefront. We always try to improve in our technological area in terms of being computerized in all areas. So we try to keep pace with what's going on in the world through the World Customs Organization. And it all boils down to training.
Delivering the sermon was Senior Customs Revenue Officer Barry B. Morris, who underscored the importance of unity, speaking on the theme, Better Together, a Call to Unity.
We recognize that unity is a struggle. You have to fight for it. The Apostle Paul says, endeavoring to keep the unity of the faith. So we have to fight toward it. It's easy to become divisive and to do the things that, seems to be normal in our culture where people want to get ahead. And this same kind of thing was happening in Ephesus, where it was a bustling society and people were immoral. They would do anything to get ahead. And so the Apostle Paul was actually sharing with the church at Ephesus how the greater value is not to do that kind of immoral practice, but rather to have principle and values.
Still to come on Our News Weekend. What do you get when you mix good vibes and good drinks during Sangria Week? Well, you get a recap of an exciting event from our entertainment correspondent, Danielle Miller. But first,
we have major news in the world of boxing and we recap Friday Night Hoops. Our sports weekend is up next.
Diet-friendly special.
Good evening, welcome to Our Sports Weekend. I'm Tej Adderley. The Bahamas has a decades-long history in the sport of boxing. Here's how boxing's local governing body in the country plans to take the sweet science into the future. The formation of the World Boxing Federation of the Bahamas was announced earlier this week. This move came after the International Combat Association cut ties with the International Boxing Association, amateur boxing's global governing body, jeopardizing fighters boxing under the IBA umbrella opportunities to fight in prestigious events like the Olympics. Former Bahamas Olympic Committee President Wellington Miller was appointed president of the new body. Now, there's a lot of politics happening at the top of the sport, but Bahamian officials are trying to give our athletes the best opportunities they can. Now we're headed over to the hardwood to see what Bahamians got up to on Friday night. It was rough sledding for Bahamians in the association. Buddy Hield made 3 threes and scored 13 as his Golden State Warriors fell to the Phoenix Suns 130-105. Eric Gordon had a perfect night, going 4 for 4 from the field and 3 for 3 from 3. His team could have used one more 3. They lost 137-134 to the Denver Nuggets. And Klay Thompson had 13, 4 boards, and 4 assists as the Dallas Mavericks lost 117-102 to the Detroit Pistons. And before we go, DeAndre Ayton has been on a tear lately. He and his Trailblazers will play his old team, the Phoenix Suns, later on tonight. You should check that game out if you can. That's a wrap for sports this evening. For Our Sports Weekend, I'm Tej Adderley.
Thanks so much, Tej. On the other side of this break, spring temperatures to kick off the month of love. Meteorologist Ian McKenzie joins us from the Weather Center with a look at temperatures across the archipelago. Stick with us.
Diet-friendly special.
Welcome back. It was a beautiful sunny Saturday earlier outside the Our News studios. As to what you can expect for the remainder of the weekend, well, meteorologist Ian McKenzie checks in from the Weather Center with those answers. Ian.
Thanks, Megan, and good evening, Bahamas. Welcome to your Saturday evening forecast and the first weekend in February, where outside temperatures feels more like spring already. Mostly clear skies, feels like at 78. Winds are from the east-northeast at 10 miles per hour. Temperatures across the country in Freeport. We have 74, 76s in Marsh Harbor, Allenstown, 78s in Nicholstown and in the capital, as well as in Governor's Harbor, 77 in Great Harbor Key, Central Bahamas, we have 69 in Camps Bay, 79 rather, as well as in Deadman's Key, 78 in Georgetown, a pair of 77s in Arthurstown and Coburn Towns in Salvador. Southeast Bahamas, we have 78 in Duncantown, as well as Providenciales, Turks and Caicos, a pair of 80s in Colonel Hill and Delectable Bay, 79 in Matthewtown, and 77 in Abrahams Bay, Mayaguana. Satellite and radar imagery at this time, we have a stall-out frontal boundary across the extreme northwest Bahamas. This should create some warm and humid conditions across that area. Elsewhere, high pressure dominating the weather conditions across the area. Mostly easterly breezes across the central and southeast Bahamas. Speaking of breezes, your boating forecast in the northwest Bahamas, expect those winds to be east, northeast, east, southeast, 10 to 15, but a caution in place due to those swells. Seas 2 to 4, but up to 7 feet in those east to southeasterly swells. High tide at 10:08 p.m. tonight, low tide at 4:21 a.m. tomorrow morning. Central and southeast Bahamas, caution there as well. Rip currents also for you swimmers, winds easterly 15 to 20, seas 4 to 7, but up to 8 feet in those easterly swells. In your extended forecast, no fronts to speak about for this week, so we're looking at warm conditions, temperatures in the low 80s, in the highs, and your lows only getting up to the upper 60s, low 70s. That's a wrap in the evening forecast. Make it a great, safe, fun night, everyone.
Have you ever wondered what ingredients make for the perfect sangria? Well, during a week-long celebration, one local business challenged their team members to create the perfect blend of this beverage originating from Spain and Portugal. Our Danielle Miller visited one of their locations and gives us this tasty highlight of the in-house competition.
Red wine and chopped fruits are the traditional ingredients for the much-enjoyed beverage, Sangria. With their extensive collection of wine brands and in an effort to promote the famed beverage, Liquid Courage hosted a Sangria week and in-house competition amongst team members. We visited their Cable Beach location and were greeted with a charming display of cupcakes, mini donuts, and the star of the show, glasses of Sangria. Store manager Tiffany Darling is the visionary behind the setup, preparing a sangria with splashes of personality.
Today I'm using the brand is the Poggio Moscato. It is a Moscato it's an Italian Moscato. And along with that I added some triple sec, some brandy, and a tropical guava pineapple juice. So my sangria is a tropical sangria.
Now it was time for our taste test.
Okay, so this definitely tastes like problems because I can't taste no liquor in this at all. So this is a very smooth blend.
Don't just take my word for it. I asked Rebecca Bain, communications coordinator at Liquid Courage, to give me her honest opinion.
So it has a nice balanced flavor of fruits, and you can taste the wine. I love that I could taste every fruit inside here, so you get a good blend of everything.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Danielle Miller.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and thank you for joining us for Our News Weekend. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Megan Shepherd. Have a safe and wonderful evening. Hey guys, Megan Shepherd here. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to click that subscribe button if you want to see more content like this. Just click right over here. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so you stay up to date with content like this from the team you already trust.